Kelsey Smith case raises questions about laws meant to safeguard people, which can complicate investigations at times. A mobile service provider refused to share location data during the missing person probe, citing privacy rules and delaying the search. Kelsey Smith, who had gone shopping for a gift, disappeared in broad daylight at the age of 18. Despite countless surveillance cameras near the shopping area, her whereabouts could not be established, and a week-long search ensued. Her remains, bearing signs of violence, were later found outside the city. The inability to trace movements through her cell phone signal intensified the case and sparked national debate. The incident prompted amendments and gave rise to a law named after the victim. Let us revisit the beginning to understand how the abduction unfolded just outside a busy shopping center. The man at the center of the case was Edwin Roy Hall, known to friends as Jack Hall, born in 1981 on April 17th in Lee's Summit, a town near the Missouri-Kansas line. He was the second child in a very poor and troubled family, where his parents relied on harsh substances and struggled to provide care. According to his later account, he was abused by his uncle when he was 5, a claim that some questioned during the proceedings. By the age of 6, he found himself in an orphanage after his father was jailed and his mother lost parental rights. Despite a difficult start, many knew him as the loving husband and a caring father. Over the years, the boy moved through several foster homes, but each time he was abandoned again and returned to the orphanage. This stemmed from unmanaged aggression and cruelty that had shown itself early. Hall displayed sadistic tendencies toward animals, tormenting them for the pleasure of watching their misery. He rejected all authority, defying his foster parents, stealing and running away. His final foster family handed him back to state custody at 15 after he attacked his stepsister with a blade. The incident drew no charges at the time. A year later, he again drew police attention by deliberately striking a younger fellow resident on the head with a baseball bat. As an adult, Hall had no official record, appeared to have matured, taken responsibility, and seemed to reform by 20. At 20, he married a woman named Alita, who bore him a son about 18 months later. Edwin then acquired an aging Chevrolet pickup from the 70s and used it to haul various goods. Neighbors described him as a quiet, humble, and friendly family man. Yet another secret life emerged only when Hall stood in the dock for serious offenses. The victim was Kelsey Smith. Kelsey was born May 3, 1989, in Overland Park, Kansas, the state's second most populous city. She was the third of 5 children in the close-knit Smith family, raised by Gregory and Missy, alongside older brother Steve, sister Lindsay, and younger siblings Cad and Zach. Gregory, known as Greg, was a former service member who had served in the United States Navy and later spent more than 2 decades in law enforcement before retirement. Missy devoted her life to health care, working many years at a local hospital while balancing work with a warm home life. From early childhood, Kelsey was lively, sociable, and theatrical. She loved singing and dancing, studied at a music school where she learned several instruments, and eagerly took part in theater, choir, and school productions. She enjoyed gymnastics and soccer, often attending games with her father and brother, and she supported the local team. With many friends, a keen sense of humor, and talent in several areas, she knew how to leave a good impression. Her love for animals ran deep, and she dreamed of attending college after high school to pursue a career as a veterinarian. In her senior year of high school, she looked forward to pursuing veterinary studies. In high school, Kelsey joined the local orchestra, played the clarinet at city events, and saved enough in 6 months to buy her first car, a 1987 Buick Regal. Her parents weren't thrilled that the car was older than she was and offered to contribute from the family budget, but she insisted on buying it with her own money to keep her independence. The Smiths were devoted to their children's education and holistic growth, yet they raised their family with a steady sense of discipline and clear rules. For example, everyone was expected to share their plans and inform the family if they would be out late. Kelsey herself was punctual, always telling her parents where she was going and who she was with. In her senior year, she began a romance with a young man named John Beersmith, a year her senior, described by Kelsey as a serious, caring partner. According to Kelsey, It was a deep and mutual love at first sight, the kind you read about in books or see in movies, and the couple rang in the new year of 2007 together, becoming practically inseparable. Both sets of parents approved of their choice and did not stand in the way. In May, she celebrated her 18th birthday, graduated from high school, and learned she had been accepted into a prestigious college in Kansas to study veterinary medicine. The days stood among the happiest of her life. The following days were filled with parties marking the end of school and romantic dates with John. It seemed she had attained everything she wished for: admission to her dream college and a companion worthy of her, with a future that looked bright. Then, on June 2nd, 2007, the day they were to celebrate a 6-month milestone, Kelsey and John were in a mall parking lot. John planned to propose with a custom engagement ring prepared for the occasion and a table reserved for two. The evening was meant to be among the happiest of their lives, and Kelsey, unaware of the surprise, looked forward to exchanging gifts with her beloved. On Saturday, Missy styled her hair, applied makeup, dressed up, and drove to a Target store just 10 minutes from home. There was no sign of the trouble that would soon surface. Around 7 in the evening, she called her mother to say she had found a gift for John, but needed the perfect gift bag with a romantic touch. Missy suggested checking a mall across the street, confident it would hold what Kelsey was seeking. Kelsey thanked her mother and said she would be home soon, where John was to pick her up at 8. That call marked the last time Missy heard her daughter's voice. When John arrived at 8 with a large bouquet, he was stunned to find Kelsey absent, and her parents grew fearful. It was utterly out of character for her not to answer calls or texts. She had vanished in broad daylight in a busy area, and no one seemed to notice. The family patriarch, joined by his 2 eldest children, began a search for their daughter. They found her car parked at Oak Park Mall, a sliver of hope that she might still be inside. After checking every floor and speaking with sales staff and security, they concluded she was not there. Returning to the car, which looked undisturbed and without signs of violence, the father, a former police officer, chose not to disturb anything, fearing evidence could be compromised. The parents reported her missing the same day, but officers initially resisted a prompt search since she was 18 and not legally missing until 24 hours had passed. Yet the father pressed on, using his old connections to push for an immediate search, and he checked hospitals for women matching her description. That evening, the family and her fiancé were interviewed to establish alibis and rule them out as possibilities. Surveillance footage from the Target store showed Kelsey entering, browsing, making a purchase, then leaving to return to her car while on the phone. She was talking with her mother about where to find the gift bag, and following that advice, drove to the mall across the street, turned around, and parked near the Oak Park Mall side entrance. Her car was later found near that side entrance. Experts who examined the scene found the car outwardly undisturbed. The gift she bought for John rested on the front passenger seat, while a backpack containing personal items, a tablet, and a wallet with about $300 stayed in the back, making a robbery unlikely. It appeared the owner had departed with only her credit card and phone in her pocket, leaving everything else inside the vehicle. No signs of a struggle or damage were detected, and there were no foreign fingerprints except for a single print on the driver's seatbelt that did not belong to Kelsey, her relatives, or her boyfriend. Locating her by the phone signal could have narrowed the search, but by that time the device had become inaccessible, presumably turned off or damaged. Still, it remained feasible to determine the last known location where the phone was active to narrow the search area, though Verizon did not provide the necessary data for days. The company did not flatly refuse to cooperate, but its assurances to investigate stretched out the process. In 2007, telecommunications firms could withhold subscriber data from law enforcement without a court order, citing information privacy laws with no safety exceptions. A disturbing figure appears in the surveillance footage, a mysterious man following the young woman like a shadow, keeping his distance and never engaging with her directly. The man, described as Caucasian, in his early to mid-20s, possessed dark short hair and a light beard, and wore a plain white t-shirt with black shorts. He entered the Target store about 30 seconds after her and shadowed her through the aisles, maintaining a few meters of distance, a pattern the prosecution likened to stalking. After she left, he followed her to the Oak Park parking lot in a Chevrolet truck, staying close enough to ensure she was not alone. He likely overheard her conversation with her mother, staying behind as she spoke, and could have learned about plans to visit the nearby shopping center. Smith had parked near a side door by a storage area where shadows obscured the vehicle, making it nearly impossible to discern the events on camera while Kelsey remained inside her car. The remaining details of the case were unclear as investigators continued to pursue additional information. A truck rested by her side as a figure in a white t-shirt and black shorts stepped into view. The stranger moved to the driver's door. Under the implied danger, she climbed into the Chevrolet, and the pickup rolled off toward an unknown direction. From the outset, media interest and public alerts were amplified by Gregory Smith's connections and experience, bringing wide coverage to the case. Smith understood that greater public outcry translated into broader press coverage and boosted the odds of locating their daughter and securing accountability. The story reached national and international outlets, including America's Most Wanted. When surveillance footage captured the stranger tailing Kelsey, the clearest shots of his face were aired, urging anyone who recognized him to come forward. That evening, police began receiving tips from across towns and states, though most proved mistaken. Every lead was checked. On the 6th of June, a Mrs. Miggs reported that she recognized her neighbor, Edwin Hall, in the footage. Doubt had held her back earlier, but learning about the truck removed her remaining hesitation, since Hall drove an old Chevrolet from the 70s. A later discovery at Longview Lake culminated in the suspect's arrest. On the 6th of June 2007, several pivotal steps occurred. Investigators obtained the last known position of Kelsey's phone from Verizon, pinpointing a single tower and setting a search radius of 1. Within 45 minutes of launching the search, the young woman's remains were found in the brush near Longview Lake in Missouri, roughly 30 miles from where she had been abducted. Investigators determined she had endured a brutal attack and was restrained with a belt around her neck. Her remains were located without clothing save for the belt and left in the bushes. For 4 days they lay exposed under the June sun, their appearance altered by insects and wildlife. Yet investigators confirmed these were Kelsey Smith, the missing young woman. On the 6th of June, the principal suspect was arrested. At his home, the police found him calm, acknowledging that friends called him Jack, and he agreed to give a statement at the station. He identified himself as Edwin Hall and, when shown a photograph of Kelsey, claimed he had never seen her before, even when presented with surveillance footage showing him nearby. He said he had gone to Target for personal reasons and did not notice her, calling the footage a mere coincidence. Convinced he had left no trace behind and would not be held to account, Hall agreed to cooperate and offered to provide his DNA and fingerprints. Crucially, a thumbprint matched one found on the seatbelt buckle of the victim's car, becoming decisive evidence. A thorough search of his home uncovered a concealed air pistol with Kelsey's DNA traces on the barrel. Hall was charged with abduction, the assault, and the eventual end of the young woman's life. Because Smith was abducted in Kansas while her remains were found in Missouri, questions arose about jurisdiction and the potential sentence in Missouri. Realizing the gravity of the case and consulting with his attorney, Hall chose to admit guilt and reveal the full details in hopes of a lighter sentence. He recounted how he spotted Kelsey in the store, followed her to the adjacent parking lot, and was pleased when she parked in a secluded spot near the side entrance before stepping from his vehicle. In Johnson County, a man armed with a pistol intercepted a woman as she approached her car, blocked the door, and forced her into his vehicle, leaving an imprint on the seatbelt as he manipulated it. He kept the weapon trained on her and directed the route to a secluded area near the state line. At a remote spot, he ordered her out of the truck, led her into the bushes, and overpowered her with a belt before concealing the victim with branches. He then thoroughly cleaned the truck to erase traces and hid the pistol at his home, convinced it would remain undiscovered. Asked about his motive, he offered no clear explanation, though he casually commented on her legs. During the investigation, several other women and girls came forward, prompting additional charges of corruption of a minor, harassment, and theft alongside the existing accusations. His defense, led by his attorney, sought sympathy by citing a troubled childhood, past victimization, and time in foster care, but the court rejected these arguments, and the attorney was the only representative for him. His wife attended every hearing but remained silent in a corner. On September 16, 2008, a judge in Johnson County sentenced Edwin Roy Hall to 27 life sentences without the possibility of parole, after which he apologized to the families and broke down in tears. He is serving his term at the Hutchinson Correctional Facility in Kansas. The Kelsey Smith Act emerged after Verizon hesitated for 4 days to release data about the last known location of the missing girl's phone, a delay attributed to privacy rules in the absence of a court order. Although it was later determined that this information might not have altered the Smith case, the episode propelled Kansas to enact the Kelsey Smith Act in 2009, mandating telecommunications providers to share subscriber location data when there is a risk of serious harm. By 2012, 30 states, including Missouri, had adopted similar provisions, and in 2021, Oklahoma, Montana, and Illinois joined. Since its passage, the act has helped save numerous lives. For example, in 2015 in Kansas, authorities located a suspect promptly after a car theft involving a child in a car seat. These laws stand as a crucial tool for protecting people who face danger. In 2021, authorities in Illinois traced the signal from a mobile phone left on the back seat by the child's mother. A related technique later helped locate a young woman who, in a desperate gesture, leaped from a cliff. She survived, though with serious injuries, and the swift tracing of her phone led to her rescue. Interestingly, the Smith family did not seek to have the law named after their late daughter. The idea came from Kansas Senator Rob Olson after their tragedy. The girl's family established a foundation to aid crime victims and to raise awareness about safety among youths. The Irene Cortez case is described as either an unfortunate accident or possible foul play by someone else involving a mother of many. People say a scorned woman can act unpredictably and with desperation, with revenge feared most. But what about a scorned man? Many would say an offended man might turn to violence, drown his sorrows in alcohol, or combine these, yet men often bear grudges less stubbornly and can be more ingenious in revenge. The Irene Cortez case, a Spanish citizen who met a mysterious end while traveling in Colombia, remains complex and ambiguous. While her alleged perpetrators were caught, convicted, and are serving long sentences, the deceased woman's family claims the real culprit remains at large and presents himself as a victim. Let us examine this tale from the start to see whether a third party was involved or if the event was unintentional. It is worth noting that each side continues to press its version of the truth. Who is Irene Cortez? Irene Cortez, born Lucas, came into the world in 1980 in Granada, Spain, the capital of the province of the same name. She grew up in a well-off family with a brother and sister, and her parents ran a small but profitable business. According to reports, her father died early, but her mother, Maria Lucas, took over the business, expanded the enterprise, and ensured her children lacked for nothing. Maria's elder brother, Uncle Pedro Lucas, was also a significant help. Irene was the eldest of 3 children, a beautiful, sociable girl who enjoyed being in the spotlight and attracted boys from an early age. Shortly after finishing school, she married and was pregnant at 17. She became a mother for the first time, and 2 years later she had her second child. Her mother and uncle provided considerable support, allowing her to pursue a good education despite early motherhood. In the early 2000s, Irene moved to the resort city of Malaga with her husband and 2 children, where she opened an entertainment venue that quickly grew popular and profitable. It began as a small disco bar and gradually became a full nightclub in Malaga. The couple welcomed their 3rd child, and life seemed prosperous and stable. At 25, Irene's husband was arrested and sentenced to 5 years for trafficking illegal substances. Tragically, a man who had joined Irene in a life she never expected met his end in prison under circumstances that remained shrouded. Thus, the burden of raising the children fell squarely on Irene, as it had for her mother, who raised 3 on her own. Irene, a determined woman who had built a successful business and planned a bright future, resolved to endure. Farid Hurus, born in 1976 in Barania, Colombia, grew up as the youngest of a large, impoverished family. His parents separated in the early 90s while he was still a teenager, and he stayed with his mother. In 2001, at 25, Farid and his elderly mother moved to Spain in search of a better life. They settled in Malaga, where Farid took whatever job he could to support them. In 2005, he began working as a waiter at a nightclub owned by Irene. She immediately noticed his work ethic and reliability, and he returned the feeling. At that time, Irene's husband was incarcerated, and she planned to file for divorce, but could not before his untimely demise. Their professional bond soon blossomed into a romance, and Farid did not balk at Irene's 3 children from a previous relationship. Irene did not mind his humble background, and the salary he received from her enabled him to contribute as their relationship deepened. Within months, they moved into Irene's spacious apartment, and Irene became pregnant with Farid's child. They later had 2 children together. It is unclear whether they were officially married, but Irene kept her first husband's surname while the children born to Farid bore his surname. In 2009, Farid was arrested for distributing illegal substances and was sent to prison. He received a sentence of 3 years, but served only 1.5 years, released early for good behavior and cooperation. Soon after, Irene found solace with another man, and they lived together for 1.5 years. Farid learned of her infidelity after his release and understandably grew furious, threatening her and her lover and nearly attacking the man. Ultimately, the matter was resolved peacefully, and Farid forgave Irene for the sake of their children, so they resumed living as before. Irene's relatives remained wary. Her mother and uncle doubted Farid's motives, and Irene's older stepchildren never fully accepted him. The youngest child, whom Farid had helped raise since the age of 2, saw him as a father figure. A fateful trip to Colombia in early 2011 marked another turning point in Irene's story. Driven by his father's grave illness, Farid felt the pull to return to Colombia, where his estranged father had been diagnosed with advanced cancer, and a sister in Barania had warned him of the urgency. Irene, who had long dreamed of visiting Farid's homeland, agreed to accompany him. She was eager to meet the father she had never known and to experience the famous Barania Carnival, while also viewing this 10-day escape as a long overdue break from work and caring for her 5 children. The couple planned a 10-day voyage across the ocean, with Irene's mother and younger sister stepping in to care for the children, though Irene's mother, Maria Lucas, tried to dissuade her, citing a troubling premonition she couldn't shake. Despite a seasonal downturn that pressed on their finances, Irene had tucked away 3,000 euros in cash at home, only to find the money missing on the eve of departure, prompting her to borrow what they needed from her uncle and close friends and to secure flights in a central hotel. On the 27th of February 2011, they arrived in Colombia. The flight was uneventful, and Irene phoned home to reassure her mother. 2 days later, Farid informed his 14-year-old son of his mother's passing. At first, the family accepted an accident as the cause, but soon the authorities disclosed that a robbery at a Barania Kia entertainment venue had ended her life, and the attackers had fled. The case drew rapid attention in Colombia, with reports casting the Spanish traveler as the victim of robbers who vanished, and police and media converged on the scene. Farid appeared calm in interviews, a stark contrast to the gravity of the moment. The Spanish embassy in Bogota confirmed the loss and said her remains would be repatriated after the investigations concluded. Meanwhile, investigators pursued answers about the night of March 2nd, awaiting clarifications as surveillance footage from the venue was reviewed, which showed Irene and Farid earlier that evening enjoying the carnival with his brother and sister and their spouses, and, at Farid's suggestion, stopping at a nearby bar for dinner and entertainment around 1 a.m. Irene Cortez and her relatives were the bar's only patrons when, around 2 o'clock in the morning, 2 young men seated apart from the group entered without ordering and appeared uneasy, drawing the manager's attention as he checked their age. They refused to show their IDs, and when asked to leave, one of them produced a firearm while the other unveiled a blade, but soon withdrew from view. The assailant pushed the manager aside and announced a robbery, demanding mobile phones and cash, as his partner moved through the group to collect valuables. The firearm wielder kept the others under threat, but he did not have a chance to act before Irene confronted him. The assailant ordered a pocket search. As Irene reached for her purse, the same hand holding the weapon lunged. A round was fired, and Irene was struck in the chest as she collapsed. The assailant fled, and Irene's brother chased after them while his sister tried to staunch the bleeding, and his brother's wife called for help. Unfortunately, responders arrived too late. Irene succumbed to her injuries en route to the hospital, leaving a perplexing case and a grieving family in the wake of the robbery and homicide that claimed Irene Cortez's life. Law enforcement mobilized all available resources. The city, crowded with carnival goers, prioritized safety. A reward of 10 million pesos was announced for information leading to the culprits. The first suspect, the firearm-wielding assailant Brian Dario, was apprehended the next day. He quickly implicated his accomplice, Juan Carlos, 18. During interrogation, Dario claimed dire financial straits, and a sick child in need of costly treatment drove him to the crime, a statement later supported by relatives who said the shooting occurred during an attempt to snatch a purse. Juan Carlos contended he was an unwitting participant, saying Brian did not reveal his plans but asked for backup, and that he carried only a small blade for intimidation and left when he realized Brian's intentions. Surveillance footage contradicted his claims, showing him returning to Brian with both perpetrators in custody and their confessions. The case appeared solved, with prison sentences looming. The court found Dario guilty of robbery and homicide under aggravating circumstances, sentencing him to 23 years. Carlos received 17 years for complicity. In the early stages, the family openly accused Farrad of orchestrating the act that ended his wife's life, prompting Irene's mother and her uncle to hire a private detective to gather evidence of his possible involvement. The investigation began with the disappearance of 3,000 euros from the hiding place in Cortez's house. Maria Lucas notes that only Farrad knew about the money, and he was the sole person capable of discreetly taking it. She had told her daughter about this from the start, and now she believed the son-in-law used that money to pay Dario to carry out the fatal act. Another major thread was the fabricated illness attributed to the man's father, used as a pretext for a trip to Colombia, since there was no cancer diagnosis and the elderly man was healthy for his age. Jean Zaris was the one who arranged the visit to that venue and pressed to keep the gathering going late into the night after others had left. The detective analyzed the recordings and formed his own view. The criminals acted oddly, one appeared frightened, and Brian approached the group and confronted Farrad without directly aiming a firearm. The conspirators seemed to know each other and behaved cohesively. Farrad moved behind Irene as she reached into her bag to take out her wallet, while the man with the weapon watched him for a signal, though it is unclear whether any signal was given. After the crucial moment, the victim and her husband moved off camera. The killer was pursued, but the expert notes that the pursuer deliberately allowed the killer to slip away, a claim that remains contested since Brian was armed and Farrad might fear for his life. Questions also arose about his conduct after the event. He gave interviews to arriving reporters and spoke about the details without showing obvious distress. Why did Zaris call Irene's 14-year-old son rather than his mother or uncles to share the news of his mother's passing? Maria Lucas says the motive was to wound the teenager for not honoring the stepfather's authority. The woman's uncle was the first to speak publicly, openly expressing his suspicions. In the course of the investigation, Pedro Lucas argued that Fair had plotted the trip in advance, effectively luring Irene into a trap, using money taken from her to hire a hitman, and with the intent to seize guardianship of the children and take over his late wife's business. Fair's mother openly defended her son, insisting that his offspring cherished Irene and the children and would never harm her. Yet she blurted a remark about the chosen one not needing to cheat on Fair, a comment that wounded his pride. Another detail surfaced about Jean Zaris leaving Spain on forged documents, as he had recently been released on parole and was said not to be allowed to depart. He denied this, stating he left legally and that Irene acted as his guarantor. 12 days after the tragedy, Irene's remains were returned to her native Spain, and the funeral was held with a closed casket because the remains had begun to decompose. Hundreds attended, including relatives, friends, neighbors, and others who had heard the story and wished to offer condolences. The only person missing was Fair, who feared returning from Colombia after threats he claimed were made by relatives of his late wife against him and his elderly mother. Before boarding a flight back to Spain, Fair sought a protective order to ensure his attendance at the funeral, but the request was denied. He then filed a court complaint alleging that the relatives impeded his return, while Maria and Pedro Lucas denied this, saying their priority was his presence at trial in Spain. Additional court proceedings followed with new circumstances and accusations against Fair and further investigations. Dario and Carlos, already serving sentences in a Colombian prison, were questioned about their connection with Fair and a possible premeditated conspiracy. Brian denied involvement, contending the crime resulted from a failed robbery and that he had never met Fair or been hired by his wife. The accusations appeared speculative, lacking conclusive evidence of premeditation or a contract, relying instead on interpretations of a recording. Dario admitted he had been under the influence of alcohol and prohibited substances that evening, which impaired his memory. Carlos insisted that his friend kept him out of his plans, and the bar episode struck him as it did the others who were targeted. One participant seemed honest, yet Brian's account of the decisive act cast doubt. He had not undertaken the robbery and ended up imprisoned, though his ailing child required expensive care. Brian claimed that compassionate people understood his motive, while the Lucas family's lawyers argued that the 3,000 euros taken from Irene had funded the crime against her and were used for treatment. Allegedly, Brian offered to take the blame to spare his child and discreetly pass the funds to his wife, but this version never stood up to scrutiny. He returned to Spain only after a court order guaranteed his safety. Months later, Yaros returned, saying he brought materials to prove his innocence in his wife's case, and that his aim was to care for the children he shared with Irene, who were in the care of relatives during his absence. 6 months later, Farid gave a revealing interview, acknowledging that he had lost almost everything: unemployment, a canceled passport, friends who turned away, and the mother and uncle of his late wife forbidding him from seeing his children. Yaros repeatedly faced Maria and Pedro Lucas in court, accusing them of intimidation as they sought to prove his involvement. Neither side could substantiate their claims. Ultimately, the children stayed with their grandmother and uncle, and the widower could not claim the late wife's estate. The case of Sarai Sierra, an American photographer, drew global attention when she vanished during a photography tour in Istanbul, triggering inquiries by intelligence services from 2 nations. Despite extensive searches, she was not located, and her remains were found in the historic center near the ancient walls. To grasp the chain of events, we attempt to reconstruct the sequence that led to this tragedy, and we will try to retrace it together. Sarai Sierra's story began a decade ago. Sarai Sierra was born in New York on November 9, 1979, as the second child in a large family that included an older brother, David, and a younger sister, Christina. Her parents, Dennis and Bethany Sim Jimenez, were of Puerto Rican descent, who moved to the United States in 1973 and settled in Manhattan, where their children were later born. They joined a local Protestant community and raised their family as evangelical Christians, guiding them with strict religious principles, attending church, socializing within the circle, and sending the children to Sunday school. Sarai grew into an active, imaginative person with a strong-willed, complex character. Unlike her younger sister Christina, who was quiet and dutiful, Sarai could be seen as a rebel who nonetheless respected her parents' authority. The home was strict. Daughters were not allowed to socialize with boys, go on dates, or be out after 9 in the evening, and every friendship was monitored with her parents, always knowing where and with whom she was. Sarai's life largely revolved around home, school, and church, and her social circle remained within those spheres, leaving her restless and yearning for more freedom even as her parents believed they were acting in her best interest. In school, Sarai planned to enter a teaching-focused university to work in culture or the arts, but toward the end of her studies, she grew interested in psychology and started to imagine a future that fused that discipline with her creative inclinations. At a gathering of their religious community, a slender, dark-haired young man named Stephen Sierra caught her eye. He was the first to speak to her. Sarai was nearly 18, and Stephen was 7 years older. With their parents' approval, the two began dating. Dennis and Bethany soon came to trust him, believing him polite, decent, and trustworthy, qualities they felt would suit their daughter. It seems Sarai did not fall headlong in love with him, yet she agreed to marry him mainly to gain independence from her parents and to chart her own course. It is worth noting that Sarai enjoyed a good relationship with her parents, though she longed for more freedom to live her life and shape her future. Less than a year after they met, in February 1999, the couple began a serious commitment. Sarai wed Stephen, who was 26 while she was 19. Shortly after, they moved to Michigan to be near Stephen's parents. For Sarai, the change was transformative, since she had spent most of her conscious life in New York. The new surroundings revived her. She found pleasure in turning a house into a cozy home, meeting new people, and exploring unfamiliar places. She started working as a receptionist at a local dental office and entertained the idea of pursuing a college degree. Soon she became pregnant, welcoming a son and then a daughter. Her university plans were postponed as motherhood claimed her attention. A few years later, with their 2 children, the family moved again, this time to sunny California, settling in the Silver Lake district of Los Angeles. Stephen received a job offer, but their earnings could not cover living costs, so they returned to New York and rented a modest apartment near the Hinged family. Financial strains followed. Sarai stayed at home with the children while Stephen relied on casual work and occasional debt. Things started to improve when the children began schooling, and Sarai found a position at an advertising agency, while Stephen secured a steady job as a bus driver. Now approaching 30, Sarai revisited her long-cherished plan for higher education, choosing psychology at a local university rather than teaching. Yet the routine lectures bored her, so she sought a field that could both inspire and express her creativity. Being a naturally artistic person, she turned to photography, joined a renowned New York photography circle, and soon earned notice for her compositional eye. On the advice of colleagues, in early 2012, she opened a page on a popular social network to share her work, and she soon attracted thousands of followers who praised her talent. Within a few months, Sarai became a true star, and her subscriber count grew exponentially, a whirlwind that sometimes dizzied her. She felt she could achieve more and proposed a group photo tour to seek beautiful, unusual locations around the world. She began with small trips at home, focusing on architectural ensembles and historic monuments. Her images were a great success, and she refused to stop. She dreamed of Istanbul, one of the oldest and most beautiful cities, to capture its sights and historic landmarks. Her parents were uneasy since she had never left the country, let alone home for so long, but Sarai stood firm. She insisted on taking her best friend Magdalena along. Behind the scenes, her family life was strained, and her marriage was fraying. Perhaps the distant tour was also a way to escape, to change her surroundings and think about the family affairs from afar. She had lived under strict rules too long and now longed to follow her heart. Meanwhile, her husband's posts hinted at unhappiness and questions about fidelity. He spoke about marriage, love, and mutual respect, and claimed he would not cheat even if the marriage was in trouble. One post suggested infidelity and was soon deleted, leaving the questions unresolved. Sarai felt similar turmoil, yet kept it private and focused on her work. As the trip neared, she learned her friend could not travel due to work problems. She was upset but did not change plans, having waited too long. Relatives worried about her flying solo across the ocean, but she reassured them that everything would be fine, promising to call, write, and share photos daily. She also planned to visit Germany and Austria, where several commercial assignments were already on the books. The entire journey was scheduled by the hour with no deviations. On the 7th of January 2013, a young American woman boarded a flight from New York to Istanbul. Upon arriving in Istanbul with a DSLR and several lenses, Sarai Sierra phoned her family to confirm she had reached safely and was heading to a pre-booked hotel. Her budget was modest, so she had to stay in the peripheral area where locals cautioned that it could feel unsafe. After leaving her things in the room and changing clothes, she hurried to the nearest metro, aiming for the historic city center. She wandered Istanbul's streets as night fell, savoring the city's beauty and capturing every frame. Evenings found her video calling her parents and husband, sharing impressions and plans for the next day while processing fresh shots for her followers. Sarai was accompanied in Istanbul by a young man named Taylan, whom she had met online in the middle of 2012, and it was he who persuaded her to come to Turkey for several months. They exchanged messages daily and grew close, visiting attractions together. Taylan, a native of the city, knew its hidden corners and arranged exciting excursions to places sometimes off the beaten path. After a week in Turkey, she planned a tour of a couple of European countries for commercial shoots, supplementing her income. To save on lodging, she accepted offers to stay with subscribers who had followed her work and hosted her in advance. At the Vienna airport, she was met by a young man who hosted her for a few days, while an older Austrian acquaintance, also fond of photography, admired her work and looked forward to meeting her. The trip unfolded as planned. Sarai visited all the places she had arranged to meet, and on the third day went to Berlin, where subscribers gave her a tour. After completing her business in Germany, she returned to Istanbul for 2 more days, where Taylan greeted her and they spent the day driving about and later visiting a popular local bar. After midnight, the Turkish man escorted Sarai back to her hotel and they said farewell. On the 21st of January 2013, the final day, she phoned her parents and husband with details of her return flight to New York, noting she had never been away from home for so long before. Shortly afterward, she went missing in a foreign country, leaving family and colleagues with unanswered questions. Joy surrounded them as Sarai's journey neared its end, and she spent one last stroll through the city, capturing photographs for her feed. Her father arrived at the airport to greet her, since her husband was at work and could not come. He arrived early, fearing that traffic would derail his plans, and soon the plane's arrival was announced. Passengers began to disembark, but Sarai was not among them. Her phone was unavailable, and every attempt to contact her failed. Dennis waited a while longer, then asked the airline staff for help. He was stunned to hear that no passenger with that name had boarded the flight. He telephoned Stephen to report the issue and urge an immediate search. Stephen first contacted the Istanbul hotel where Sarai had been staying, only to learn that her belongings remained in the room and she had not checked out, though she should have done so the previous day. The news that she was missing for a second day sparked real panic within the family, who did not know how to proceed. Stephen, who could access her accounts, scanned for clues and uncovered messages with Taylan that looked suspicious. He reached out to Taylan, who claimed he had seen Sarai the day before the planned departure and said she had not called him, despite promising to. The family promptly reported the disappearance to the American embassy in Turkey, and within hours a broad search operation was organized on the ground, with a special unit formed. Dennis and Sarai's parents flew to Istanbul to take a direct part in the investigation. Investigators began by mapping her social circle and speaking with those who had seen her shortly before she disappeared, including hotel staff. The hotel manager recalled that she was the last to be seen the night before departure, leaving with a small bag and a camera. She was due to check out the next day but never did, and the following morning her husband learned that her belongings and documents still remained in the room. The receptionist described what she wore that day. Taylan's account remained murky and suspicious. With the investigation ongoing, the family held on to hope for any news about Sarai. The case centers on a man identified as Taryn, who introduced himself to a new acquaintance under an alias, a detail whose purpose remained unclear. They had been in close contact for several months before that meeting, and Sarai had arrived in Istanbul at his invitation. All this suggested a romance, but Taryn insisted they were merely friends. The investigation then aimed to reconstruct Sarai's route on that day in as much detail as possible, checking her cell data and street CCTV. It established that she took the subway to the Sultanahmet area, visited the pretery between the Bosporus Strait and the Golden Horn Bay, and went on to Amona Market, where she became lost amid a large crowd of tourists. Her trail then returned to the subway as she headed towards the Sarburna Walls, but she soon disappeared from the cameras again. After several hours, the searchers reached the ruins and conducted a thorough sweep, hoping someone recalled a lone woman with a camera. Then came a grim discovery. A young woman lay near the ruins of the walls of ancient Constantinople, concealed beneath an old, dirty blanket with no signs of life. Forensic experts estimated she had been there for 10 to 12 days. There were no garments on the lower half of the body, which pointed to violence. The autopsy revealed a blunt impact to the head as the likely cause, along with several hematomas and a few broken ribs. Under the fingernails were traces of material, indicating she had fought back. The case seemed puzzling. The bag, smartphone, and camera were taken, while she wore gold earrings, a wedding band, and a costly watch. Surveillance footage captured a young woman resembling Sarai filming something on her phone. A man approached, either struck or pushed her, and they both disappeared from view. Identifying the attacker proved elusive, fueling rumors and theories that spread rapidly. Information leaked to the media, creating an international stir as authorities urged anyone with information about the missing American woman to come forward while the investigation remained discreet. The discovery of the body intensified the atmosphere surrounding the case. Many wondered why a young married woman would fly solo across the ocean to Istanbul and how she had funded the journey. Initial investigators suspected she had sought out her lover, Tylon, also known as Taron, and perhaps visited another man in Austria. Both friends denied any closeness. It later emerged that the man who sheltered her in Vienna had a criminal record, and there were rumors of a drug link, though checks did not confirm this. There were also whispers that Sur might be working for United States intelligence to gather information abroad, but that theory proved untenable. Turkish special services, with the FBI, led the inquiry, yet early leads were scarce. A few weeks later, the police named the suspect, Tal Salih, an unemployed man who collected waste paper on city streets. He had borrowed money from relatives and left the country, reportedly crossing the border into Syria. A search of his home produced a DNA sample that matched skin traces and seminal fluid found on the victim. With the match, the remaining doubts fell away. The fugitive had fled to Syria, but was detained trying to re-enter Turkey. He had joined rebels there and obtained a firearm, was wounded, and decided to return home. The local police quickly identified him and informed security services. In questioning, his account described watching a young woman along a wall, admiring her from a distance, and then pursuing her with the intent to rob as darkness fell. The victim had a brand new iPhone and a valuable camera around her neck. As night settled, there were no other people nearby. At one point, Sierra turned around and, as it seemed to him, snapped a photo of him, a moment that unsettled Talali. Talali seized a rock and lunged, striking Sierra on the head. The two rolled toward the ruins of a wall, and Sur sustained bruises and broken ribs. Taking advantage of Sur's unconsciousness, Talali committed an intimate act. He delivered another heavy blow to her head to end her life. Talali took Sur's bag, her camera, and her phone and walked away. Along the way, he found a discarded blanket and used it to cover Sur's body. By then, night had fallen, and the chances of meeting someone near the wall were slim. Returning, he dragged Sur slightly to the side so she would not be visible from the hiking path, then covered her with the blanket and left. While the search for the American woman continued, Talali revisited the scene to ensure Sur was deceased and lay as he had left her. Learning that Sur had been found, he fled the country, borrowing money from his sister. The camera was damaged in the fall. The smartphone remained password protected, and he could not unlock it, so he discarded the other stolen items as he fled. He did not deny his guilt and showed no remorse. Forensic analysis linked him to the crime, including skin under Sur's fingernails and other markers. Sur's phone had last signaled near his residence, and a video surveillance recording captured the attack. A psychiatric examination was ordered because of his behavior, but experts ruled that he was sane and fully aware. In the summer of 2014, the judge delivered the verdict. Talali was found guilty on all counts and sentenced to life imprisonment. Sur's relatives deemed the decision fair. Sur's body was transported to New York for burial, with the costs covered by a Turkish airline. Donald Harvey, born on the 15th of April, 1952, in Hamilton, Ohio, was the eldest of 3 children. He was affectionately called Donnie by his parents, Ray and Goldie Harvey. Soon after, the family moved to Brunville, Kentucky, a rural community tucked on the eastern slopes of the Appalachian Mountains. Ray worked as a tobacco farmer, while Goldie cared for the children at home. Despite grinding poverty, love endured, and the couple remained devoted even as their marriage grew strained. Donnie was a quiet boy who mostly kept to himself. He showed no obvious signs of trouble, though whispers of a troubled past would surface later. According to various accounts, he endured abuse at the hands of several men before reaching adulthood, at least 3, including an uncle on his mother's side and an older neighbor. At 18, he said he was assaulted by his then roommate, Randy White. A traumatic history does not excuse cruelty, but it is a fact scholars would later analyze when considering his development. In school, Donnie kept to the margins. He read extensively, earned good marks, and became known as the teacher's pet, which drew taunts from peers. After Sturgeon Elementary, he entered Boonville High School in 1968. Despite strong grades, he grew bored with the routine and ultimately dropped out. He would later obtain a diploma through a Chicago correspondence program and complete his general educational development the following year at the age of 16. With little sense of direction, he moved to Cincinnati, Ohio, where he found a job at a local factory. He seemed to be making a start, but the plant demand soon faded and he was laid off in 1970. A few days later, his mother called him to visit his ailing grandfather, who had recently been admitted to a hospital in London, Kentucky. He went, unaware of how the days ahead would unfold. Answering his mother's plea would alter his life. During daily visits to his ailing grandfather, Donald grew close to the hospital staff, so much so that they offered him a position as a hospital aide. What began as a perilous path through madness stretched over nearly 2 decades. His true motive remains unclear, though some suspect financial desperation after losing his previous job. Though not a trained nurse or doctor, the staff trusted him to spend long hours with patients, handling hygiene tasks, catheterizations, and medication distribution. His first weeks were quiet until an incident with an 88-year-old stroke victim, Logan Evans. Evans smeared excrement on Donald's face, possibly as a result of his stroke. To silence him, Donald used a blue plastic bag and a pillow. He checked the patient's pulse with a stethoscope to confirm the end, disposed of the bag, cleaned the room, dressed him in a fresh gown, showered, and reported to the nurses. Afterward, no questions were raised. The next day, 69-year-old James Tyree faced a similar turn of events. Tyree protested the catheter, and Donald restrained him until he vomited and ultimately passed away from an air embolism. No suspicions arose. 3 weeks later, he tampered with the oxygen supply of Elizabeth Wyatt, a 42-year-old patient who had prayed to be relieved. Hours later, a nurse found her unresponsive. No one questioned him. Over the next 10 months, 15 patients under his care passed away. Whether for gratification or experimentation, the methods varied: smothering, sabotaging oxygen, and other means. This grim trajectory unsettled the hospital. He was a self-styled angel of death who used poison and mounting brutality to end the lives of vulnerable patients. After an argument with the patient, Donald slipped into the room and punctured the catheter with a coat hanger, an injury that sparked an infection and left the man's life ended days later. He framed these acts as merciful, a cruel disguise by which he played God with the vulnerable. On March 31st, 1971, exactly 1 year after his first fatal act, that was his last day at Marmount Hospital. That evening, he was arrested for a burglary committed while intoxicated, and his rambling confession to the police was not taken seriously. He faced petty theft charges and paid a hefty fine, after which he briefly attempted to rebuild his life. He found work as a part-time nurse's aide at Cardinal Hill Hospital in Lexington, and in June of 1973 he began another nursing position at Good Samaritan Hospital, juggling both jobs until moving on. Between August of 1974 and September of 1975, he worked first as a telephone operator and then as a clerk at St. Luke's Hospital in Fort Thomas. For reasons unclear, he managed to curb his urges during this period, perhaps because he lacked the same access to patients. Yet his inner demons grew harder to control, driving him across the state line to Cincinnati in September of 1975. There he returned to a hospital setting, taking a night shift at the Cincinnati VA Medical Center, serving in several roles from nursing aide to autopsy assistant, and enjoying the cover of night supervision and broad access. Over the next decade, he ended the lives of at least 15 patients at the hospital, even keeping a detailed diary about his acts and notes on each victim. The records describe a pattern that included poisoning desserts, smothering with a bag and cloth, and tampering with intravenous lines and beverages involving substances such as arsenic and cyanide. Donald Harvey, a hospital orderly whose actions tainted the wards for years, studied medical journals to refine how he concealed his crimes. Cyanide became his preferred tool. He could slip it into meals or into a patient's feeding tube, gradually amassing about 30 pounds pilfered from the institutions where he worked and storing it at home for ready use. Despite the mounting fatalities, he stayed under the radar, making the cases look like accidents or natural failures and earning a chilling reputation among colleagues as a discreet presence around the wards. He insisted his actions were acts of mercy, yet other crimes hinted at motives of rage and revenge. In the early 1980s, he briefly dated Doug Hill. After a heated quarrel, he poisoned Hill's ice cream with arsenic, though Hill survived. Later, he moved in with Curl Howler, and jealousy led him to tamper with Howler's meals with small doses of arsenic. After another dispute, he tainted a female neighbor's drink with a hepatitis serum, leaving her gravely ill. Donald Harvey moved through hospitals as a nurse's aide, his calm exterior masking a troubling pattern among patients under his care. Luck shielded him in the early days, as several patients under his watch grew gravely ill without drawing suspicion. Early on, he targeted Helen Meter. Arsenic laced into a pie led to her passing at a local hospital a week later. In 1983, after a tiff with Howler's parents, Harvey began to taint their meals in small doses. On May 1st, 1983, Howler's father, Henry, suffered a stroke and was admitted to Providence Hospital. Harvey slipped arsenic into his pudding before leaving during a hospital visit, and the elder man did not survive the night. Over the next year, he tainted Carl's mother, Margaret, on and off, but she persisted. In January 1984, Howler ended their relationship and asked him to move out. Unable to accept the rejection, he spent the next 2 years attempting to end his former partner's life with his poisonous mixtures. He even pursued a reckless plan against one of Howler's female friends, and at one point managed to bring Howler to a hospital. The first cloud of suspicion arose on July 18, 1985, when security guards noticed the way he carried himself and searched his gym bag. Inside, they found a .38 caliber pistol, hypodermic needles, surgical scissors, gloves, a spoon linked to illicit use, medical texts, 2 occult books, and a biography of serial killer Charles Sedge. For carrying a firearm on federal property, he was fined $50. He was offered a quiet resignation rather than firing, and nothing in his file suggested wrongdoing. Hospital authorities did not open an inquiry. In February 1986, he joined Drake Memorial Hospital in Cincinnati as a part-time nurse's aide, unaware of his past. Impressed by his performance, the new employer soon offered him a full-time position, and he settled back into his routine. Over the next 13 months, he ended the lives of 26 patients and attempted to harm several more by disconnecting life support, injecting iron into veins, and introducing poisons such as arsenic, cyanide, and cleaners. The 2-decade-long spree concluded with one last act on March 7, 1987. A 44-year-old patient, John Powell, on life support after a motorcycle crash, suddenly passed on after months of steady improvement. During a mandatory autopsy for a vehicular fatality, Donald Harvey faced a situation he'd never encountered before. An assistant coroner detected a faint almond scent, a classic clue pointing to cyanide, and authorities quickly became involved. Initial suspicion centered on people close to John Powell, but no evidence or motive connected any of Powell's friends or relatives. The investigation then turned toward hospital staff with access to Powell's room, and Harvey was among the names on the short list. Hospital personnel volunteered for polygraph tests. Harvey volunteered too, even buying a guide on passing lie detectors, but ultimately skipped the test and called in sick on the appointed day. They also learned of his unusual departure from the VA hospital and his infamous nickname, the Angel of Destruction. The probe tightened its focus on Harvey. He was summoned for questioning and denied any involvement, presenting himself as a victim of coincidence. After hours of questioning and a good cop, bad cop routine, he finally admitted to placing cyanide in Powell's GBE, saying the act stemmed from pity for Powell and his family, while denying responsibility for other suspicious fatalities. Harvey was taken into custody as investigators sought additional evidence. On August 11, 1987, Harvey, then 35, told investigators he had taken 33 lives over the previous 17 years, a figure that would later rise to 70 in total. After several psychiatric evaluations, experts determined he understood right from wrong and could be held to account, hence he was deemed sane. In November of 1987, he was sentenced to 8 life terms plus 20 years for the acts at Mary's Mount Hospital. In February of 1988, he pled guilty to 3 additional Cincinnati homicides and 3 attempted acts, receiving 3 more life terms, along with 3 terms ranging from 7 to 25 years. The inquiry into the remaining cases was closed. For 2 years, investigators found insufficient evidence linking him to the crimes. In a 1991 interview, a Columbus Dispatch reporter asked Donald Harvey what motivated his acts, offering a rare glimpse into his mindset. He said the reign of terror began with a craving for control, that others had governed him for 18 years, and that he seized his own fate. He spoke of enjoying power and the ability to decide whether someone would continue living. Among notorious offenders, Harvey stands out not only for the sheer number of people affected, but also for targeting individuals he knew. An Associated Press piece dated July 23, 2001, ranked him first on a list of the worst offenders in the United States, surpassing the infamous John Wayne Gacy. People anticipated he would spend his days behind bars, yet fate had other plans. On March 28, 2017, Harvey, then 64, was found badly beaten in his cell in protective custody at the Toledo Correctional Institution in Lucas County. He succumbed to head injuries 2 days later. Months later, inmate James DeElliott, serving 37 years for burglary, wrote to the Toledo Blade and confessed to taking part in the assault on Harvey. Elliott said he grew up in Kentucky near relatives of Harvey's victims and claimed the act would provide closure. In September 2019, Elliott received a life sentence after pleading guilty. Harvey maintained that most of his acts were acts of mercy, but the truth points to a man who assumed authority to determine others' fate, perhaps because decades passed without capture. This is a tale of resilience framed by the bravery of 8-year-old Jennifer Schuett, whose actions in a critical moment are extraordinary. Her case is rare in that the victim aided in catching her attacker even after losing the ability to speak from a severe injury. Jennifer endured for nearly 2 decades, persisting in pursuit of justice until she prevailed. Jennifer Schuett, a schoolgirl living with her mother, Elaine, grew up in a home where love and hard work defined daily life. Elaine held several jobs to ensure her daughter's happiness and well-being, and Jennifer blossomed into a bright, curious learner who valued study. Like many children, she feared the dark and often shared a room with her mother. I remember my own childhood fear of the dark and how I preferred the warmth of a parent's presence. That night in August, the two slept together in the same room while Jennifer moved restlessly, making it hard for Elaine to sleep. At around 2:30 a.m., something changed. Elaine woke and asked Jennifer to return to her own room for the night, since she needed to rise early for work. In a gentle, loving tone, Jennifer replied, "Just because I love you, Mom, I'll sleep in my own room tonight," and she walked toward her room. Elaine would come to regret that choice for years, though at that moment she could not foresee what lay ahead. The next morning, when she went to wake Jennifer, she found her missing and the window facing the parking lot wide open. Elaine immediately called the emergency services. When officers arrived, she explained that she hadn't heard any noise or cries after Jennifer had gone to bed. Their first-floor apartment overlooked the parking lot, and Elaine feared that someone might have watched Jennifer and entered through the window. She knew their home wasn't ideal for a young girl, yet it was the best they could afford. Nevertheless, Elaine's parents stepped in to assist her and their granddaughter by purchasing and renovating a small house nearby, where they planned to move in a few months. They had been at the site the day before Jennifer disappeared, gardening, where mosquitoes had kept Jennifer from resting that night. Devastated by her daughter's disappearance, Elaine said Jennifer was all she had and pleaded for her return. The police pursued every lead, and not long after, there was news around 6:30 in the evening. That same day, emergency responders were summoned by parents whose children were playing in a field and stumbled upon a troubling scene: a young girl lying motionless in the grass about 5 kilometers from her home. The child was an 8-year-old girl named Jennifer Shue, in critical condition yet breathing. A deep gash stretched from one ear to the other on her throat, and the neck injury left her pale and weak. She was transported to the hospital, where doctors fought to stabilize her and protect her airway. In the emergency room, Jennifer appeared slender for her age, very pale, with scalp injuries and scratches on her back, unable to speak because of the neck trauma. After surgery, her condition stabilized and she was not in immediate danger. When she regained consciousness, she developed a fear of men. The ward soon became difficult for her, as she resisted comfort from male staff, and she even struck a doctor when approached. Elaine, her mother, tried to reassure her that all the personnel were there to help. The Dickinson Police Department assigned a protective detail to monitor her room throughout this time. Jennifer remained in a constant state of panic, and she could not speak with investigators. To obtain information, detectives gave her a notebook and several pens, asking her to respond in writing because of her fear. Jennifer wrote messages to her mother, who passed them to an officer. Her replies were remarkably precise, outlining the events with surprising clarity for someone so young. She began by describing her routine before the incident, going to her room, turning on the light, and picking a book to help her sleep. She recalled a stranger lifting her, running with her along the sidewalk, and covering her nose and mouth to prevent screaming. He placed her in a car, claiming to be an undercover officer, and Jennifer immediately sensed that something was wrong. Looking around, she saw her mother's car in the parking lot, which added to her confusion about where they were. Her courage and intellect shone through these notes, providing investigators with a clear picture of that night. She knew the police could be trusted, yet her mother had warned her never to trust strangers. A man who claimed to be an officer offered her a ride, and soon she found his story at odds with the familiar honesty of protectors she had learned to rely on. When she asked to be dropped at her grandparents' house, he said they were away, a claim she only doubted after spotting their car in the driveway. He steered toward her school, about 3 kilometers from home, and spoke of watching the moon change color, insisting that her mother would come for her. She waited for headlights that never appeared, and a growing sense of danger settled over her. 5 minutes passed before he insisted they go farther, arguing that her mother wouldn't reach her in time. They pulled into a dead-end street and stopped. She pressed to confirm his identity, asking how he was connected to the law, but he offered vague, evasive answers. He hinted at something in the back seat, and when she turned to look, he did something that left no doubt about his real intentions. The next moment, she was overpowered, and she lost consciousness. When she woke, he was dragging her through a field by her ankles, the pain from sticks and stones tearing at her back. She pretended to be lifeless, and he released her feet and drove away. Soon she heard the car door close and the engine fade into the night. She could not scream, and a deep wound on her neck reminded her of the danger she had faced. It is believed she lay there for 12 to 14 hours. As the sun set, passing cars and the distant voices of children drifted by, and a dog approached several times but never came near. Fire ants bit at her, keeping her alert enough to endure the long vigil. When she stirred again, a sting on her leg announced a moment of renewed awareness, and a police officer's voice urged her to stay with him, promising that she would be okay. She was placed aboard a life flight helicopter, and the long road toward safety began. The ordeal proved profoundly challenging for young Jennifer, shaping her resilience and her path toward recovery in the years that followed. 8-year-old Jennifer faced her fear of men as her mother asked questions, and Jennifer's answers were relayed to the officers behind the door. She even remembered the stranger's name, Dennis, and described him as grief-stricken with a possible scar on his face. Days after her disappearance, the police enlisted forensic artist Lois Gibson, who spoke with Jennifer through gestures and notes. Together, they produced a remarkably detailed composite sketch that was released to the public in hopes someone would recognize him. Meanwhile, investigators searched the scene and found Jennifer's clothing about half a mile away, along with a man's shirt and underwear. Although there was hope that DNA on the garments would identify the perpetrator, no matches were found. Jennifer's recovery was gradual, and she showed remarkable resilience even as a child. There was a moment when she grew upset over a chocolate bar she could not eat, screamed in frustration, and a faint sound escaped. Doctors were stunned to learn that her vocal cords, nearly severed, were beginning to heal. After her discharge, she returned home and resumed school, eventually pursuing higher education and choosing to become a children's librarian. Yet she never forgot that night, and each day felt like a hunt for the person who had taken her. The danger could have lurked anywhere, a neighbor, someone at the post office, or a shop clerk, so she carried a steady vigilance. She later met Jonathan, and for the first time in years she trusted a man, and they fell in love. At the same time, the trail of the attacker grew colder, and the chances of finding him seemed slim as the case moved from one investigator to another. 18 years after that dreadful night, Jennifer received a phone call from Detective Tim Cromie, who would take over her case and promised to do everything possible to bring it to resolution. Jennifer believed him. Tim and his colleague Richard uncovered a substantial amount of evidence collected on the day Jennifer disappeared, and from the time she was found, including Jennifer's underwear and the perpetrator's shirt and underwear. They sent a DNA sample recovered from the clothing to Quantico, Virginia, though investigators knew that technology had advanced. Over 19 years, investigators understood that the case's age would keep it from the lab's fast track. Cold case work tests patience, memories fade, people relocate, and sometimes lives drift to the background. Time, however, brought advances in DNA science, turning small clues into tangible leads. After a full year of persistence, the DNA found at the scene matched Dennis Earl Bradford. The 8-year-old girl, on pain relief and unable to speak, wrote the name Dennis and, with remarkable precision, described his appearance. Bradford, 39, lived in North Little Rock, Arkansas, and his DNA was in the national database after an assault at a bar in 1996. Although he received a 12-year sentence, he served 4, and within months of release was arrested for driving under the influence near his home. On October 19, 2009, he faced another arrest. Tim Cromie and Richard Renzen traced a link from the North Little Rock man to Dickinson, Texas, noting he had been taken into custody there in 1987 with 2 addresses within 2 miles of Jennifer's apartment. To confirm identity, detectives retrieved a photograph from his license taken 19 years earlier, and the image bore a striking likeness to the girl's composite sketch. Bradford claimed ignorance of Jennifer and could not explain why he had paused near her building. He described that guilt after the assault had driven him to consider harming himself with a firearm, but he chose not to. He was admitted to the psychiatric ward, the same hospital where Jennifer remained, and detectives informed Jennifer. After 19 years, the long-sought suspect was finally in custody, though he never faced Tiffany Johnston in person. Reese's mother had been close friends with Tiffany's mother. He even phoned Kathy soon after Tiffany's passing to share condolences, yet he remained elusive, and the case stayed unresolved for many years. In 2015, investigators gained a breakthrough as DNA technology had advanced substantially. A sample collected during Tiffany's autopsy was analyzed and matched William Reese in Cody's database. In September 2015, Reese was charged in Oklahoma City with the 1997 kidnapping and the fatal act against Tiffany Johnston. Just before the trial, he began confessing to other offenses to strike a deal with prosecutors. Already suspected in Laura Smithers' case and in the disappearances of Jessica Kane and Kelly Cox, detectives showed him photos of the three victims. He accepted responsibility but denied any sexual motive and agreed to indicate where the remains of Kelly and Jessica were buried on the condition that prosecutors would not seek the maximum penalty. In April 2016, Reese led investigators to a site in a Houston pasture, where after days of digging, remains were recovered and later confirmed by the Harris County Medical Examiner's Office as those of Jessica Kane. The search then moved to a burial site in Brazoria County, where another set of remains, identified by dental records, were confirmed as Kelly Cox. The trial for Tiffany Johnston's abduction and the fatal act began in May 2021 in the Oklahoma County District Court. On the 28th of May, the jury found him responsible for the abduction and the fatal act, and on the 19th of August, the judge sentenced him to life imprisonment for those offenses. Following his conviction in Oklahoma, he was extradited to Texas in early March 2022 to stand trial for the disappearances of Laura Smithers, Jessica Kane, and Kelly Cox. He pleaded guilty to all three offenses and received a life term in June 2022. There is an old saying in law, justice delayed is justice denied. Families waited for decades to learn the fate of their loved ones, while the person behind these crimes kept the facts to himself to serve his own ends. It is painful to see that he finally provided the answers these families so desperately needed, and we can only hope that they may begin to heal and find some measure of comfort in knowing what happened. In Victoria, Australia, the Sharp family enjoyed a peaceful life by the beaches until a fateful March in 2004, when their home became a crime scene and Anna Kemp, with their daughter Gracie, vanished without a trace. John Sharp, born on February 28, 1967, grew up in a world that felt familiar to many, a childhood woven from small joys, shared hopes, and a neighborhood where neighbors knew one another by name and children played outdoors until the sun dipped low. As he moved into adolescence, those who knew him observed a quiet evolution, a bright, courteous youth who matured into a thoughtful, introspective man, always present in the room yet seemingly distant, as if he scanned the world for something elusive. Anna Kemp, a New Zealander whose warmth lit rooms and whose love of life drew people in, joined John at the Commonwealth Bank of Australia, where they both found purpose. She was 4 years his senior, and their easy laughter and long beach strolls soon bound them. They married in October 1994 and settled on the Mornington Peninsula, moving through a string of homes around South Melbourne, a tapestry of suburbia that promised shared plans and a future built on mutual support. The arrival of Gracie in August 2002 brought radiant joy to their days. Her bright eyes and a smile that could illuminate a room made her the center of their world, even as the responsibilities of parenthood began to shape the couple's path. Yet, love did not shield them from strain, and Gracie's health became a major concern when she was diagnosed with a hip condition requiring care. John and Anna faced these pressures while clinging to the hope of stability, drawing strength from a small but steady circle of friends and a community that offered support amid the daily rhythms of a sun-soaked coastal life. In March 2004, the Sharp home became a scene of police activity as Anna and Gracie vanished, leaving behind a hollow silence that drew in investigators, relatives, and neighbors who wrestled with questions that offered few answers. John Sharp found himself at the heart of the unfolding mystery, a man whose quiet temperament and private grief became the subject of careful scrutiny as authorities pressed for any clue that might reveal their whereabouts. The case played out against the backdrop of a landscape many Australians recognize, a mix of sunlit beaches, tree-lined streets, and close-knit communities where a single missing person inquiry can quickly become a matter of public concern. These threads trace back to a life already marked by simple triumphs and quiet challenges, ending abruptly on that March day when Anna and Gracie disappeared and the long search for answers began, changing the course of their family forever. Gracie's early months involved a medical condition that required a corrective, orthopedic harness, bringing constant discomfort and relentless crying. After the harness was removed, eating problems surfaced and sleep remained unsettled, testing her parents to their limits. The family moved once more to a home on Prince Street in Mornington, a quiet coastal town about 35 miles south of Melbourne. In November 2003, Anna learned she was pregnant with their second child. She was thrilled, a devoted mother, and Gracie became the center of her world. Anna had long hoped for another child to ensure Gracie would not face life alone when her parents were gone. The illusion of harmony endured until March 21st, 2004, at a nephew's birthday celebration, the last time Anna was seen. Guests recalled no signs of discord between Anna and her caring husband, John. The next day, she dropped Gracie at daycare and planned to meet a friend. The following day, she spoke with her private health insurer about extending coverage for the upcoming child. John contacted Anna's friends to say she had left with another man, leaving Gracie with him, and he told Anna's mother that she had abandoned him, not knowing her whereabouts, while insisting she would return within the week. He continued to bring Gracie to daycare, claiming he and Anna had parted ways and that Gracie would not be coming back. Anna's family received emails from Anna and a bouquet from their daughter, but no phone call. By May 2004, the media portrayed the situation around a man who appeared distressed, holding a photo of Gracie and claiming he loved Anna, while saying she had left him for another man and asking for information. Yet his demeanor and statements seemed odd, inviting scrutiny of the narrative despite his claim of a separation. Investigators began to scrutinize his car and other evidence. A carefully crafted narrative masked a troubling reality behind every unanswered question. Anna and her mother kept in touch by phone every few days, and concern grew when Anna missed several calls. Her partner, Sharp, offered weak explanations, being busy or taking Gracie to daycare, but the doubt only deepened. Anna's devout Catholic faith, the revelation of an affair, and her 20-week pregnancy intensified the family's mistrust of Sharp's account. This tension was compounded by an impersonal email and a gift, and the absence of direct phone contact. When Anna remained missing, her mother reported her to the police in New Zealand, prompting contact with Mornington authorities. Confronted by investigators, Sharp claimed Anna had entered a blue car and moved with their daughter to Chelsea, denying involvement. The search for Anna and Gracie began with urgency, and a missing persons officer urged investigators to keep an open mind, noting only limited activity on Anna's accounts. Hope that she might be alive persisted early on, but as days passed, that hope faded and a painful truth began to loom. Sharp quickly emerged as the principal suspect, as there was little support for his story. As more witnesses spoke, details about growing tensions inside the Sharp home came to light. Undercover surveillance intensified the pressure on Sharp, who kept largely to himself and rarely invited visitors. A breakthrough came when investigators observed him using Anna's phone and bank card to create the impression she was active across the southeast suburbs of Victoria. Cameras captured him driving to Chelsea Beach, retrieving a white plastic bag from a shrub near a public toilet, pulling out Anna's phone, making a call, and then withdrawing cash at a nearby ATM. He disposed of the bag along with the phone and other items in a Mount Martha bin, returned home, and then notified the missing persons unit that his wife had called him and that funds had been withdrawn from their joint account, though investigators already understood what had occurred. The team pressed on, their findings tightening the focus on Sharp and the sequence of events. Friends and associates described a home under mounting strain, adding texture to the emerging picture behind the household doors. As the inquiry continued, the story Sharp told faced increasing inconsistencies, while investigators pursued every lead to determine what happened to Anna and Gracie. The evidence pointed to an outcome too terrible to imagine, yet there was insufficient proof to charge Sharp with ending his wife's life, and motive remained unclear. Investigators hoped he could indicate where the bodies lay, but as days passed with no action from Sharp, they moved to arrest him on the 10th of June. In a fresh round of questioning, Sharp insisted Anna had left willingly on March 23rd. The investigators remained skeptical, noting his emotional detachment regarding his wife's alleged affair and her departure with their daughter, and discrepancies in Sharp's timeline began to emerge. Norrell Fraser, an observer, described Sharp as a closed book, insular, a loner who showed little emotion and revealed no personality. Desperate for a confession, they brought in his parents and showed them footage of John on Chelsea Beach, asking them to speak with their son. An hour after they left, John began to talk, his final barriers of denial collapsing as he confronted the truth about his own impulses. He admitted harboring fantasies of ending his wife's life for months before the act. He spoke of sleepless nights, mounting financial pressures, and the routine of daily life that pushed the family toward a breaking point. He said Anna's controlling, moody nature wore him down, and he believed her assertiveness undermined his sense of manhood. He described the pregnancy as a surprise, saying he did not want another child and resented the new burden, keeping doubts about paternity to himself. John ran a conveyancing practice, and the responsibilities of a growing family weighed heavily, leaving him withdrawn. Anna tried to bridge the growing gap, but John retreated further into his own mind, growing distant and unable to share his feelings. A wall of silence formed between them, her efforts meeting with indifference or hostility as his thoughts stayed hidden. In early 2003, he bought a powerful hunting device from a sporting goods shop in Mornington, a purchase that signaled the start of a troubling chapter, and he spent countless hours mastering its use in the backyard. Days later, a domestic dispute escalated into a tragedy. In February 2004, Anna underwent an ultrasound to learn the baby's sex, but John did not accompany her. Returning home, she expected his interest, yet he showed none and asked nothing. Distressed by his apathy, Anna confronted him and warned that she would leave if his indifference persisted. They went to bed around 9 or 10 p.m. In the stillness of night, Anna slept as John Sharp wrestled with the state of their marriage. He went to the backyard garage to fetch the spear gun he kept only for target practice and returned to her room where their 20-month-old daughter lay sleeping. He aimed the loaded spear gun at Anna. The first discharge did not end her life, so he reloaded and fired again, ending both her life and the unborn child. He covered her with towels and slept on the sofa, the house quiet through the night. By morning, he had removed only the spear shafts. After dropping Gracie at daycare, he turned away a TV antenna technician Anna had booked, claiming she was away, while Anna's body lay in the bedroom under the cover. He buried Anna in a shallow grave hurriedly dug in the garden. Officer Fraser described the confession as almost banal, as if it were news of what someone had for breakfast. In the days that followed, Sharp took Gracie and returned to the marine supply store for another spear. He told investigators he was thinking of looking after Gracie by himself, and that is when the whole plan began to unravel. For 4 days, voices in his head debated Gracie's fate, with thoughts of whether she should be with her mother. A few days later, on the evening of March 27th, after tucking Gracie into her cot, Sharp drank whiskey and cola to numb his senses, then went to the garage armed with the spear gun and inflicted terror on Gracie, who endured several impacts before her life ended at his hands. Gracie did not die instantly. After the 4th impact, she was gone. The next morning, he returned to Gracie's bedroom, unable to bear looking, and pressed a towel to his face while he removed the bolts. He then acquired a chainsaw at a local Bunnings warehouse in Franken and unearthed Anna's remains from the garden. He disposed of Anna's and Gracie's bodies in garbage bags at the Mornington Refuge Transfer Station and discarded the spear gun, the chainsaw, and Gracie's clothes and toys, telling the attendant that he had a bootload of hard waste. Officer Fraser said the interview was the most difficult he had ever endured, and he remembered Gracie's story as the hardest part to listen to. During one interview, a sudden pause sent me to the ladies' room, where I pressed my head into my hands and realized I could not listen any longer. I rang Anna's friends and family with a fabricated tale of an affair. Her friends immediately sensed something was wrong, for Anna would never leave Gracie. After their daughter's loss, he phoned his mother-in-law, claiming Gracie was with Anna in a brighter place at his home. He drafted an email from Anna to her family in New Zealand to reassure them she was well. The messages did not sound as if Gracie had written them. He used Anna's account to contact her brother, asserting she had left with another man whom she was expecting a child with. One of the emails intensified the mystery surrounding Anna's prolonged silence. The family filed a missing person report on Anna. The interview uncovered that he had jotted notes for his cover story while reviewing Sharp's TV appearances. Dr. Cliff Lamley, a body language expert, called it a poor attempt to feign concern and sadness. He juggled his eyebrows, contorted his face, and used a tissue as a prop, yet there were no tears or moisture. The family recalled disturbing details. They believed Sharp's motive lay in Anna discovering Gracie's abuse by him, though there was no evidence to prove it. Sharp had a history of abusing the children of family and friends, something Anna did not know before marrying him. A relative remembered that after the honeymoon, Anna told her mother she might have made a mistake. After a 3-week search at a Mornington landfill, investigators recovered the remains of Anna and Gracie. Norrell Fraser, a veteran of nearly 3 decades with Victoria Police, recalls the Mornington case vividly. During the search, she spotted a blue bag, opened it, and found a kitchen glove, which kept her investigating. She returned to the bag, sensing something was off, and realized the glove concealed more than it seemed. She later recalled that she felt she would find Anna, and when she did, she could not leave her. She waited with the bag for the crime scene team, unable to abandon Anna among the debris. That intuition has stayed with her in the years since. Anna reached out to me, and I vowed to prevent her from taking such a step, certain that I would locate her, and soon I did. When it became clear Gracie was nearby, I dropped my head into my hands and wept, mourning what Anna had endured, her family, and humanity as a whole. They were laid to rest at Green Park Cemetery in New Zealand, where Anna Kemp's maiden name marks the site, and the memorial also bears the name of Anna's unborn son, Francis. In court, the defense sought to illuminate John Sharp's psyche and the profound distress that preceded these acts. From that perspective, Sharp's life appeared beset by mounting pressures, financial strain, marital discord, and a crippling sense of being entrapped. The sentencing judge said the events were too awful to contemplate and singular in their barbarity. He stated that Sharp had ended his daughter Amma's life to conceal the earlier act, a calculated cruelty that stunned all who heard it. Forensic psychologist Carrie Dan described Sharp as quiet and shy, a man who was socially inept with limited communication and little emotional intelligence. Psychiatrist Dr. Lester Walton characterized him as dependent, passive, and retiring, convinced that the only way to solve his marriage was to end his wife's life. Sharp pleaded guilty to the acts against Amma and Gracie, receiving 2 consecutive terms of life imprisonment without the possibility of release until after 33 years, with parole expected in 2037. On hearing the verdict, he wept like a child and remains in protective custody as he faces threats from other inmates. His elderly parents described his crying spells as horrific, saying he had forged a life sentence upon himself. One of Sharp's nieces said the crimes had stolen 3 beautiful lives. Investigators called it Victoria's worst instance of familicide. Love, healing, and time offer some relief, but it also deepens the resolve to value one's own family and moments spent together. Ultimately, trust remains the pillar of every relationship, from parents and children to partners, and when that trust fractures, the pain is immense, reminding us to cherish what we have. In a narrative echoing many others, a Pakistani boy and girl once shared a blissful relationship until the girl ended things after glimpsing her partner's darker tendencies. What followed, and the boy's actions toward his girlfriend, sent shockwaves across the country. Kut Ali McAdam was not merely an ordinary citizen. He served as a diplomat and ambassador for Pakistan, a role that required him to live abroad. At the time described, he resided in Islamabad, and earlier he had held ambassadorial duties in South Korea and in Kazakhstan, marking him among the nation's senior statesmen. Their family consisted of 5 members: Kut Ali McAdam, his wife Kaur McAdam, 2 daughters, and 1 son. On October 23, 1993, Noor was born in Kut Ali's home, a healthy and cheerful baby who often laughed. Despite a demanding career, Kut Ali devoted quality time to his family, helping his children grow up with strong values. Noor showed a gentle, intelligent nature and loved reading, whether school texts or other works. Because of his diplomatic duties, the family moved across countries, and Noor began schooling in Ireland, completed high school in South Korea, and later the family moved to Kazakhstan. She even contemplated pursuing studies in the United States, where her elder sister Sarah resided, but she eventually returned to Pakistan. Noor remained humble, thoughtful, and confident, and she cared for animals, especially stray dogs and cats, often feeding them. Although born into a wealthy family, she did not chase material possessions and nurtured a deep passion for art and calligraphy, sometimes creating religious paintings. Given the diplomat milieu, social gatherings were common, and Noor's family attended these for networking. It was at a party around 2008 that Noor met Zahir Jaffer. Zahir Jaffer, born in the United States, spent his youth in Pakistan, studied in the United States, and also lived in the United Kingdom, with his father Zakir Jaffer, a prosperous businessman. The Jaffer family, thanks to their father's success, stood among Pakistan's notable households. In Pakistan's most affluent circles, the Jaffer family built a diverse portfolio spanning healthcare, oil, real estate, and construction, a network that also opened doors to the country's military establishment. One of their firms, Ahmed Jaffer and Company, later saw Zahir Jaffer rise to chief executive, while his father Zakir had long overseen operations. Yet a change was underway. Zahir began working as a therapist at Therapy Works, where he listened to school children discuss mental health and organized lectures and presentations. Despite outward success, Zahir had always been reserved and quick to anger, with few friends and a habit of avoiding parties. At a single gathering, he met Noor, and an immediate connection formed. Noor valued his conversation, and their distinct personalities drew them together. Their families already knew one another, and friendship ripened into a romance, with both sides acknowledging the pairing. Noor complimented Zahir, bringing out a side of him others rarely saw. He began to enjoy social life more, and at a party he even danced with Noor, to the surprise of his relatives. But as the relationship deepened, a troubling dynamic emerged. Noor would later learn that Zahir could be pushy and harsh, and he harmed her on several occasions. There were also instances when he raised a hand against his mother. After nearly 3 years together, Noor ended the relationship in early 2021. The two families were unhappy with the breakup. In such affluent circles, relationships are often viewed with strategic considerations in mind, not merely personal happiness. Zahir felt affronted and began to consider moving back to the United States, where he held citizenship in addition to Pakistani. On the 18th of July 2021, Zahir arranged a taxi to Islamabad International Airport, as his plan to fly to New York was set for the early hours of the morning. On July 19th, he had already packed his bags and informed his family, but before departing, he insisted on meeting Noor at least once. He phoned Noor that evening. She was at home preparing for Eid with her family. He requested a final meeting, explaining that he was leaving for New York and intended to settle in the United States, never to return. Although they had separated before, they had shared a 3-year relationship, which led Noor to agree to see him again. At 9:05 p.m., Noor left her house without telling her family she was headed to Zahir's, saying she would visit a friend and return soon. She reached the designated spot outside Zahir's house in Sector F-74 sometime around 10 p.m. Zahir's flight was scheduled for 3:50 a.m. Between 10 and 11 p.m., he repeatedly called his travel agency, asking unusual questions about refunds and future bookings, and later said he would still travel on that flight to the United States. Meanwhile, Noor remained inside his house during this period, a place that felt new to her. A taxi arranged to take them to the airport arrived at 11 p.m., but Zahir did not come out for another half hour, telling the driver to wait. At 12:07 a.m., he told the driver that leaving then would prevent catching the flight, and he paid half the fare before the taxi departed. At 1:40 a.m., Zahir called again and asked the driver to return to his house, which the driver did, anticipating full payment. This time, Zahir kept the driver waiting outside for a few minutes, and at 2:15 a.m., he emerged with his luggage, Noor beside him barefoot, which the driver found odd. Zahir spoke to Noor during the ride, but she did not respond, and the driver paid little attention. Midway through, Zahir instructed the driver to head back toward home, insisting they were already very late and would probably miss the flight. The taxi finally dropped them off again at Jaffer's house at 2:35 a.m. As soon as Noor stepped out of the taxi, Zahir forcefully pulled her into the house, despite the taxi driver's account that she should not return there with him. Noor remained at Zahir's house on July 18th, and she spent the entire day there on July 19th. On Eid Day, July 20th, nor did she come to meet him. When Noor had been missing for more than 24 hours, her parents, who had returned from Eid shopping, learned she was gone. At 12:57 a.m. on July 20th, Noor's father texted asking where she was, but there was no reply. At 5:48 a.m., Noor's mother messaged her and two family friends called, still with no response. At 10:43 a.m., Noor sent a voice recording to her mother, the contents of which were never released publicly, and it was the last time her mother heard her voice. Soon after, Zahir called Noor's mother from his own phone, insisting that Noor was not at his house and implying he had not seen her. From 1:00 p.m. to 7 p.m. that day, Zahir repeatedly called his father, Zakir Jaffer. Around 7:10 p.m., Noor appeared on security footage on the first-floor balcony, clearly distressed and holding her abdomen. The clip showed her attempts to leave, the gate closed by the security guard, while Zahir leaped from the balcony to intercept her and bring her back inside. He dragged her inside after she stumbled. Inside the house, there were also a security guard, a cook, and a gardener, but none helped Noor. From July 18th to 20th, Noor made 6 attempts to escape, but each time one of Zahir's staff alerted him and she was recaptured. After bringing Noor back inside around 7:30 p.m., Zahir's anger grew. Since then, Zahir did not contact anyone for 30 minutes after an initial attempt to fire a pistol, which jammed. Yet his urge to harm persisted, so he drew a blade and assaulted No while she tried to resist, scratching Zahir's face and arms with her nails. No's condition worsened until she fainted, but Zahir continued his blows. He seized No by the throat and pressed until she could no longer breathe. Later, the post-mortem report indicated No's life ended from asphyxiation. Before that moment, Zahir had torn at No's clothing, though the details were not elaborated. After this, he inflicted further injuries. He then phoned his father and friends, claiming intruders had broken into their house and that help was needed. Because Zahir's father funded therapy works, he also contacted Taher Zahor, the chief executive of the company. At around 8:30 p.m., Taher Zahor arrived with 6 colleagues. Finding the door closed, Taher and his team climbed in through a first-floor window. On reaching the first floor, Zahir attacked one of the entrants with the blade, causing grave injuries. 5 or 6 people restrained him, binding his hands behind his back and securing his feet. Inside the room, the group found a grim scene. No lay at the center, with a separate portion located some distance away. Neighbors, alarmed by Zahir's screams, notified the police. By around 10 p.m., the police informed Kikutan Kat Arm that his daughter had suffered a violent act. No's family mourned and sought accountability for Zahir under Pakistani law. In a case involving capital punishment, Zahir was arrested and promptly admitted to harming the young woman after her rejection of his marriage proposal. He had proposed to her. She declined. He had arranged one-way tickets to New York for the 19th of July, and he had pledged that if she accepted, they would marry and settle there. If she refused, he threatened to harm her. From the 18th to the 20th of July, he sought to persuade her to agree, but when she refused, he carried out a brutal assault. All the servants in his house witnessed what happened, yet none intervened, fearing retribution and the possibility that if they alerted authorities, he would retaliate. When the case reached court, he appeared disheveled and loud, even abusing the judge, and officers had to drag him in and out to proceed. He claimed mental instability to avoid the capital penalty, arguing that he suffered from schizophrenia. Nonetheless, the medical examination concluded he was mentally fit and had acted with awareness. There were past harassment allegations against him in both the United States and Pakistan, and as the trial unfolded, public demands for justice grew across the country. On the 24th of February, 2022, the court imposed 2 capital penalties, one for the assault and another for ending the woman's life. His 2 household staff were also sentenced to 10 years each. The images and testimony described a powerful, tall, and aggressive man who pressed his will upon a vulnerable young woman for almost 48 hours, turning those hours into a time of terror. The case became widely known, underscoring issues of control and violence that resonated beyond the borders of the 2 countries. Lisa Maria Kaisa was born in 1994, the 8th of 8 siblings, into a large family that was far from prosperous. Her parents, absorbed by their own troubles, offered little warmth, and rumors spoke of harsh treatment and frequent turmoil at home. The tale centers on 2020, a year when the world fought a new coronavirus in the parish of Pio on the northeastern edge of Quito. Lisa, a woman whose gaze hinted at hidden depths, would become the subject of a true Ecuadorian nightmare. On Tuesday, October 27, 2020, Lisa sent several messages to the father of her children, David. The words carried despair as their paths had already diverged. She spoke of a forthcoming child and then of a life that seemed to lose meaning, signaling a decision she felt compelled to make about the pregnancy. Throughout the night, she urged David to come to her, but he refused. His parents urged him to stay away, and at dawn, he followed that advice. Early on October 28th, neighbors heard a faint cry for help from Lisa's home. Looking outside, they found a woman on the floor appearing ill, and they summoned aid. Responders arrived to find Lisa in a critical condition, yet alive, and she was rushed to the hospital. Police began examining the scene while in the same house, Lisa's 2 children, a girl of 5 and a boy of 9, lay unconscious. Medical teams could not revive them, and their small hearts had ceased. David Aosta was soon identified as the father and notified, arriving at the scene with his father. He learned that Lisa survived the hospital stay, while the children did not. After several days, as her condition stabilized, investigators presented the prosecutor with sufficient grounds to seek an arrest warrant for the central figure in the tragedy. When released from hospital care, she was moved to a social rehabilitation facility where a psychological assessment became a prerequisite for the forthcoming proceedings. In later sessions with a criminologist, Lisa spoke of a difficult childhood marked by frequent parental conflict and harsh treatment. The authorities pressed forward with their inquiries as the case moved towards the next steps, the focus remaining on understanding what had driven the events within their fraught context. Authorities remained focused on gathering context and preparing for the legal process. Lisa's childhood was marked by constant quarrels at home and her parents' divorce, leaving a lasting imprint on her mind. To pursue her studies, she began working at 11, determined to escape the dysfunction and build a different future. An expert report noted a history of abuse and described how she sought strength beyond her broken family. In the marriage, David's behavior shifted from belittling to aggression, and he began to raise his hand against her. On the day of the tragedy, investigators found glasses with liquid residues and later traced epilepsy pills belonging to one child, along with other chemicals needing identification. A strong odor in the kitchen and a hidden area under the utility room led them to remains wrapped in a blanket, seemingly left for a long time. The remains were identified as Jaime Llano, 28, who had been reported missing days earlier. Jaime's sister Rosa said he was last seen on October 18th. Lisa had contacted his family after the disappearance, claiming a message from Jaime about illegal substance traffickers, holding him and demanding $8,000. She urged the family not to alert the police, a claim that became crucial as investigators probed potential hidden victims. Lisa testified that in 2020 she met Jaime at a cookie factory and they became friends. She wanted to return to her husband, who allegedly planned to press Jaime for money. He handed Lisa a white powder and instructed her to mix it into Jaime's food. After the meal, Jaime fell asleep and did not wake. In despair, Lisa took the same poison and gave it to her children, but the outcome did not unfold as planned, and she sought help from neighbors. Investigators conducted a thorough probe, but found no evidence linking David, and no close associate could have foreseen how Lisa Maria and David Acosta's lives would unfold. Lisa was only 16 when she entered high school, a dreamy and romantic girl. David, a strong and determined young man, formed a swift bond with Lissa, and what began as friendship soon blossomed into love. Lissa's unexpected pregnancy surprised their families, but David's parents stood by him and welcomed Lissa into their home. During difficult times, David's family offered genuine support, even inviting Lissa to live with them so she could finish high school. When Lissa turned 18, they wed, and 2 years later they awaited their second child, a daughter. David's parents then gave them their own apartment, a small corner of family happiness. Yet over time, the relationship deteriorated. Both partners betrayed one another, sowing mistrust and disappointment. Lissa even spoke of psychological abuse from David, prompting her to seek police help and obtain a protective order that forced him to leave the home. After this, she began to blackmail him for money to see their children. In early September 2020, their eldest son began to suffer seizures. She took him to the emergency room at Bach-Ortiz Hospital. Doctors diagnosed a focal form of epilepsy, a severe condition affecting a specific part of the brain. Medical staff urged further testing, including MRIs and consultations with specialists, but Lissa did not follow through. A month later, another seizure led them back to the ER. Reviewing the history, doctors noted that she had not pursued the recommended tests or seen specialists, leaving him without necessary care and warning that continued neglect could invite legal trouble. Despite these cautions, Lissa persisted in ignoring medical advice. Weeks later, after his condition resurfaced, she called David and said a social worker would visit to discuss the situation. She offered him a drink, but as he drank, his condition worsened and the social worker did not appear. David returned home to fetch something to relieve his symptoms. The next morning, he woke in a terrible state, barely able to speak as his tongue felt numb and every movement pained his body. His parents urged an ambulance and he was taken to hospital. Tests showed a psychoactive substance in his system, though he insisted he had not used anything of the sort, leading him to suspect someone may have slipped him something in a public place. In early October 2020, Lissa decided to hire a nanny for her children. Her cousin Patricia recommended a friend, Bertha, a responsible 48-year-old woman seeking work. On Monday, the 5th of October, Bertha arrived at Lissa's home. Lissa urged her to take a pill she said could prevent infection from the COVID-19 virus, presenting it as a highly effective natural remedy. Bertha swallowed the medicine and stepped inside the house, and the two sat down to discuss the babysitting duties. Minutes later, Bertha began to feel ill, with a headache, stomach pains, and eventually vomiting. Patricia arrived soon after, having repeatedly tried to contact her cousin, but Lissa did not answer. Patricia went to the house and found Bertha nearly fainting on the couch. Lissa told her cousin what had happened and expressed concern that she had not summoned emergency help. Patricia immediately contacted emergency services. Medical staff arrived and stabilized Bertha. Doctors diagnosed poisoning from a toxic substance, which can occur when taking certain medications used to combat COVID-19. They concluded Bertha did not tolerate some component of the COVID-19 pills. Earlier that year, in June, Lissa's former friend, Marcus Scanto, had passed away after a poisoning incident. Although the cause had remained unclear at first, the new circumstances drew investigators to re-examine his case. They scrutinized the deceased's home and found Lissa's fingerprints on glasses used the night before Marcus's passing. That finding added fresh evidence to the inquiry, suggesting Lissa's possible involvement. Soon another accusation had surfaced from within Lissa's own family. On September the 2nd, during a family gathering, Lissa offered everyone a drink she had prepared. All those who tasted the unidentified beverage fell ill. Fortunately, no one passed away, but the 56-year-old mother suffered a stroke. Lissa's father claimed that, while relatives sought medical help, his daughter took $1,300 from the house. The investigation broadened to include not only the harm to children and concerns about a former partner, but also risks to her own relatives. In May, Jose Luis Arazzo, a friend of Lissa, was found in his home, and a few days later he disappeared. The sequence of events added to the growing puzzle surrounding Lissa. Neighbors soon detected a foul odor and alerted the authorities. An initial examination found nothing suspicious and attributed the incident to a heart attack. Yet one of Jose's sisters grew uneasy, discovering a bottle of liquor in the refrigerator. The family also noticed several items missing from the home. It emerged that Lisa and Jose had been friends, and when he passed away, the person believed responsible contacted his relatives by phone with a distressed voice, claiming that Jose owed her a large sum and needed repayment. The ploy did not work. A little later, Lisa called again, changing her voice to hide her identity and presenting herself as Jose's friend, saying she was pregnant by him and now required support for the child. Although the relatives were skeptical, Lisa persisted and made a third attempt to mislead them, insisting she knew who was behind Jose's passing and offering to meet to disclose details. Had she not been arrested on charges connected with the losses of her own children, the list of victims might have grown. When the media reported Lisa's arrest, Jose's relatives understood that something was wrong and promptly alerted the authorities. Jose's remains were exhumed for forensic examination to determine the real cause of the loss. On December 22, 2020, a hearing was held for Lisa Maria Kaisa on the losses of her 2 children and for another person. The proceedings were conducted virtually due to restrictions related to the spread of the coronavirus. Lisa had been staying at a social rehabilitation center. The prosecutor stated that Lisa gave her children a toxic mixture of chemicals, and in interrogation she claimed she had grown desperate and could not leave the children with her husband David, who did not care for them. She admitted that she wished they were no longer with her. At the end of the hearing, the judge ordered her remanded into custody pending trial. The case continued the following year at Pachena Provincial Court, where the prosecutor presented evidence to show Lisa's guilt. Among them were statements by David describing messages his wife had received on the eve of the tragedy. In one message, she wrote that she would take with her what belonged to her in reference to the children. She said she did not know where she and the children would go, heaven or hell, but she felt as if she were in hell. Lisa added that she did not expect her husband to forgive her, knowing he disliked her and would hate her even more now. David also spoke about his unstable relationship with his wife during the hearing. The Pachena Provincial Court heard a case involving Lisa Maria Kaisa and serious harm to her children. A reconstruction presented by the prosecutor showed she had taken 2 pills, cried out for help, and then lost consciousness. The daughter passed away in bed, and her older brother, trying to summon aid, collapsed and did not recover. Forensic findings linked the losses to a premeditated act caused by asphyxia from pulmonary edema and intoxication from a mix of epilepsy medication and other unspecified substances, probably including insecticides and disinfectants. The prosecution also charged Lisa with the death of Jamie Anchuano, whose remains were bricked up in the kitchen. The perpetrator was suspected of attempting to harm David and other family members. The hearing raised concerns about her attitude toward her son's health after a diagnosis of localized epilepsy. She ignored advised tests and follow-ups, and when he was hospitalized again, his condition worsened, prompting a risk to her parental rights. Psychological assessments depicted her as emotionally volatile and increasingly dependent on others, seeking constant understanding and displaying anxiety when events did not unfold as planned. Witnesses described insecure attachment and erratic behavior. After a long trial spanning 10 months, Lisa Maria Kaisa was found culpable of offenses against her children. The Pachena Provincial Court sentenced her to 34 years and 8 months in prison and ordered her to pay David more than $20,000 in compensation. Media coverage noted her composure during the proceedings, with emotion surfacing only when the children were mentioned. The case that began in August 2021 revealed new details during hearings. Lisa admitted giving a friend a white substance mixed with alcohol, but claimed it came from David, a claim later contradicted by the investigation. A psychiatrist who interviewed Lisa concluded she did not intend to end Jamie's life. Her aim was to intimidate the family to extract money, and she demanded $8,000 as ransom. Forensic tests showed the situation was more complex. Jamie tested positive for poison in his system. In Ecuador, the case of Lisa Maria Kaisi, known locally as Doña Vado, stands among the most disturbing in recent memory. Authorities described a case in which the remains were discovered with a fractured rib cage and a wire circling the neck. Lissa claimed that after her acquaintance passed away, she chose to seal him beneath a back room and cement him in place. The store owner testified that Lissa bought building materials during the days surrounding Jim's disappearance. Following arguments at a party, prosecutors sought a retrial in April 2022. At that retrial, prosecutors added an extortion charge. Lissa allegedly contacted Jaime's relatives, claiming he was being held by a group of gangsters and demanding $8,000 for his release. The defense contended there was insufficient proof of her involvement in Jaime's demise. Nonetheless, she was found guilty and sentenced to 22 years in prison, plus a payment of $5,000 to the victim's mother. As Jaime's trial proceeded, investigators neared completion of inquiries into two other men linked to Lissa's alleged victims, Marcus Scanto, aged 48, and Jose Luis Arazo. Tests after Marcus's death showed traces of the same substance Lissa had given to her children, and he also suffered severe stomach inflammation. Forensic materials included a glass bearing Lisa's and Marcus's fingerprints, as well as a swab containing her DNA. Possible motives cited include jealousy and financial gain. There is also evidence that she had asked Marcus for financial help and that he lent her $1,120. Marcus was her first known victim. The ultimate outcome for these cases remained unclear, with no public updates or formal charges publicly announced. At the time, Lisa Maria was only 26. Her widely publicized case ranks among the most shocking in Ecuador in recent memory. People across the country know her as Doña Vado. Lisa Maria Kaisi is regarded as a serial killer in Ecuador. The victims endured great distress and their families faced deep grief. The charges include 5 fatal acts and 9 attempted ones. The maximum is 40 years, potentially allowing release at 70. The motives behind Doña Vado's actions remain unclear. Some point to financial greed, others to a drive for revenge connected to her life circumstances. 2 children, innocent and unaware, faced a fate none could have imagined from their own mother.